Hello and welcome to computer class. My name is Dave and today we're talking about networks and network hardware. And this is kind of computer components part 3 because we're talking about the networking component or the network card of the computer, but really going beyond that and really expanding the scope of it. So let's start out by saying, what is a network? A network is a collection of computers and devices connected together, often wirelessly, if we had to put a definition on it. Okay, so that's a pretty important definition. It tells us that networks are basically devices connected together. So there are 4 types of networks, and many of these types exist at the same time. So not 4 necessarily, they're just different layouts to. It's basically one network getting bigger and bigger and bigger type of a thing. But they are different types nonetheless. They're kind of circles within a circle, so to speak, to describe it. And you'll see that as I go along here. But starting out, the smallest one is a local area network. It's local because it's inside of a building, usually. It's a network that connects computers and devices in a geographical area such as a home, school computer laboratory, office building, or closely positioned group of buildings. They are a local and in-house connection of computers. So again, local area network. Anytime we say local storage, it means storage that's on your computer's hard drive. Anytime we say local area network, we're referring to the network inside the building behind the router. Okay, so that's the first type. The second type is a subset of the first type, and it is a WLAN, or a wireless local area network. And so basically, your local area network can also have wireless components to it. We use these things called AP links, which I'm going to talk about in a second, or you have a Wi-Fi network at your house. All of that is projecting a signal around, and it's adding onto or adding another physical component to your LAN or local area network. Um, it is a LAN that uses no physical wires, computers, and devices that access a wireless LAN must have built-in wireless capability or the appropriate wireless network card. And so, anytime you want to connect to the WLAN, you have to have the wireless card on your computer, or of course, phones have it built in, and then tablets do as well. So that's kind of the distinction there. All right, next we have a MAN network, which is a metropolitan area network, and I like to think of it as like either a building across town and you're connecting it together with a wire and they're on the same network, or B, could be buildings like right next to each other, maybe they're across the street and they're on the same network, they're connected together. Whatever it is, they're in a geographic location of each other. It is a network that interconnects users with computer resources in a geographic area or region larger than uh, or that is covered by even a large local area network, for instance, as a LAN, but smaller than an area covered by a wide area network, which I'm about to talk about in a second. So again, local area network, you add on a little Wi-Fi to it. You could have a MAN area network. See how we're kind of progressing outward in the ring here and making bigger and bigger networks, so to speak. Okay? So that's a metropolitan area network, connecting multiple buildings or facilities together. And you might see examples of this in like the government. They might have like 2 buildings across town and they connect to each other. You might see this as an example where research facilities will have maybe something uh, they'll have a campus and all the campus buildings are connected together. It's more of a metropolitan area network. It's something connected together between buildings and things. Maybe a separate data cable running between them. And then you have a wide area network. And this could be a region like a state, or it could be small as a county, or whatever. It's basically networks that reach across cities, states, or even the world. And the biggest example of a wide area network is the internet. The internet is the world's largest public wide area network. It's all of the local area networks connected to each other, basically, is a WAN. And there are lots of examples of this. The government has wide area networks that are just their own cables that are laid, and they can communicate with one another just on those cables from coast to coast. There's examples of how one wide area network, like the United States, is connected via a cable across the Atlantic Ocean to um, to Great Britain, and so then there's two wide area networks coming together and connecting, and then the internet as a whole could also be considered a wide area network. It just depends on how you look at it. Anyway, you can kind of see how there are different types of networks and how they interact there. Again, the internet is the world's largest public wide area network. And then talking about network hardware, what is the devices and or hardware that's associated with setting up a network? The first thing is Ethernet cables. They're one of the most popular forms of network cable used on wired networks. Ethernet cables connect devices on local area networks such as PCs, routers, and switches together. Okay. Now you can also connect, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, but you can also connect switches together with fiber, which is another cable. But just to keep this simple, the Cat5 or Cat5e is pretty much the standard for network cables right now. It is a standard Ethernet cable, and you connect your devices together with those. I'm sure you all have seen a blue internet cord that's known as an Ethernet cable. They have come out with Cat6, and basically all that they did was they twisted the wires a little bit better to explain it simply, and that makes the signal go faster. So, not really go faster, but uh, work better to define it without getting into the science of it. Anyway, so Cat5e or Category 5 cable is the standard Ethernet cable defined by the Electronic Industries Association and Telecommunications Industry Association. Cat5 cable contains 4 pairs of copper wire. It supports fast internet speeds up to 100 megabytes per second and beyond. And so the next generation of cables, which will be Cat6, will be able to carry a whole lot more than that. And so we're looking forward to today when things are even faster, because that will mean faster internet to you as a consumer. So those are the data cables associated with it. Ethernet cables, and the actual technical name for it is Category 5E cable. Now these cables plug into devices. So one of the devices that they plug into is called a router. And a router is a device that forwards data packets along networks. And that's pretty important. The fact that it forwards data packets. Now, what kind of is a data packet? Well, when information is sent over a network, it doesn't just send the entire picture that you take on your phone or the entire document that you upload to an email or the email that you send. It takes the data and it pulverizes it down into little packets and encodes the packets with special encoding so that when the receiving device gets the packets, it is able to reassemble the parts and basically recreate the photo that you sent as one big file. And that's why we're saying data packets, and that's why we're explaining that. A router then is connected to at least 2 networks, commonly known as LANs or WANs, and its internet service provider. So let me explain that. So usually there is a black cable known as a coaxial cable that comes down the road to your house, and it'll just come in the wall, and it has kind of like a screw-on fitting to it, and you'll plug that into the back of um, your router slash modem, because usually they're combined nowadays. You'll plug that into the back of it, and then that provides Wi-Fi to your house. And the router you can see is a picture on screen. It'll plug right into the back of that. Um, that is known as the ISP or Internet Service Provider. It's a subscription you pay for each month to have internet and probably cable TV to your house. That being said, you have Wi-Fi on the network, but you could also plug in Ethernet cables to that router and plug in devices, hardwire them if you wanted to. Routers are located at what's known as a gateway. That's the term. When the reason it's a gateway is because it's the first line of defense. When someone's trying to, if they were trying to hack your house, for instance, they would first hit the router, because they would come down that black cable, and then boom, they would hit that router, and they would see the router's interface, and whether or not you have it set up correctly would define whether or not they would be able to get in very easily or not. But that's known as the gateway. It's sort of the gatekeeper. And it's the place where 2 networks meet, like I just explained. See, the wide area network or the internet is coming and meeting with your local area network. So it's 2 networks meeting together, and in that meeting place, you stick a router. Okay, so that's really what a router is. Okay. Next, routers use headers and forwarding tables to determine the best path for forwarding the packets. They use protocols such as ICMP or Internet Control Messaging Protocol to communicate with each other and configure the best route between two hosts. Now, what's a host? A host is two computers. So anytime you're trying to send data on a network, we refer to that as a host. And so you're using a certain protocol or certain rules by which information is sent and received on each computer, and the routers determine the best way to get to that other computer from your computer. And so they do all the directing and forwarding on the internet. And also, there's one, obviously, in your house, forwarding and sending it as the first router to go. And it bounces off all the different routing devices of the internet and then arrives at that person's router, comes in the gateway, if that router allows it to come in, and then the receiving computer or device can accept the packets or information that's being forwarded. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. That being said, in the business world, there are at the end of internet cables or Ethernet cables, we would sometimes put these things called wireless access points. And basically, what a wireless access point is it's a device that allows wireless devices to connect to a wired network using Wi-Fi or related standards. The AP usually connects to a router via a wired network as a standalone device, and it can also be an integral component of the routing itself. And so basically, it's a dome usually on the ceiling. You can sometimes see them in businesses, small businesses, large businesses, hospitals, and things. They have them on the ceiling, and it's how people get Wi-Fi on the network. And basically, you would plug this device into a switch. Okay, so I'm going to work backwards now on a public network, like a really nice business network. So you'd have a AP link, which would go using Ethernet cables, wind its way all the way back to a switch. And a switch is a computer networking device that connects devices together on a computer network by using packet switching to receive, process, and forward data to the destination device. So usually in a business like CCS, for instance, the place where I work, or in a any type of hospital, or if you're over at Target, if you're on McDonald's Wi-Fi, any of them, they have these AP links. They have these. There's a wire coming out the back of them that's usually Ethernet cable that would go back and it would connect to the switch. And then the switch would go back and it would connect all the way to the router, which I already talked about. Okay, and other devices, there's other devices you can add as well, but that's the basis of how a network is laid out. Although these switches have tables on them and they set up these indirect connections, direct connections, I'm sorry, with the devices that are on the network, so they know where to forward the packets from the people that are sending the information into the network, and how to route it to the exact computers to get it to the devices that need the information. And so these switches are pretty high end and they know exactly where to route things. The same as your Wi-Fi in your house. It knows which device is being sent to and where to send the packets and formulates it all together and sticks it on those devices. Okay. This is a very low-end quality video that explains kind of the situation that I just explained to you guys. So check it out. I will link it down in the description below. And then lastly, there's a piece of network hardware, and this is why this is Computer Components Part 3, the wireless LAN card. The wireless LAN card is a device that allows a computer to connect to a wireless network, sometimes called a NIC card. And basically, it'll have a spot where you can plug in the Ethernet cable to the back of your computer if you have like a desktop or a laptop or something like that. And it can also be a Wi-Fi card as well. It can be 2-in-1, but most of the time it's just for hardwire connections. Hardwire connections are still, in most people's opinion, better than a wireless connection, though that is slowly fading out, and to the point where one day, wireless, you won't be able to tell the difference between wireless or hardwire. I still can tell the difference when I'm on a network. It just is how it is. But we're fast approaching a day where that will not be able to be, you won't be able to tell the difference. But this is how you would plug in a computer to maybe a switch, or maybe you would plug in a computer to a jack on the wall. There's these Ethernet jacks on the wall. They're called RJ45 jacks, and you plug in your Ethernet cable to them. They then connect all the way back to a switch, which then connects to a router ultimately at the end of the day. Okay, so that you can get out onto the internet. So that being said, obviously these devices are there to produce these uh, devices ultimately are there to get you on the internet, and one form of internet you can get on is wireless internet, known as Wi-Fi. So I wanted to define what is that term. The term Wi-Fi is short for wireless fidelity. At least that's what some would say, and I tend to hold to that. It's developed by the IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. The 802.11 is a series of network standards that specifies how two wireless devices communicate over the air with each other. And so these devices are talking to one another, and they are sending packets, and they're using the wireless fidelity, the 802.11 protocol to send and receive information. Okay, that's as far into that as I'm going to get. It's not really necessary to get too technical with it. Just know that Wi-Fi is short for wireless fidelity, and that 802.11 is pretty much the standard for networking. Some helpful tips when using public Wi-Fi is as follows. Avoid typing passwords and financial information into public Wi-Fi. Like if you hop onto McDonald's Wi-Fi or Burger King Wi-Fi or something like that, or Target, they're under no obligation to secure their network to the level that you probably will find in like a hospital, or your own personal network would probably be, less of a target. But there's other people on that network that could connect, and they could do malicious things to you because you're on the same network together. That it's just probably a better idea to not type passwords or financial information when on public Wi-Fi. It's just good practice. Sign out of all your websites when on public Wi-Fi. Don't leave something signed in. Disable your wireless connection before you leave, and do not leave your computer unattended, because obviously someone could steal your computer, but secondarily someone could just get on your computer and install something while you're wherever you are, using the restroom or walked away or whatever. It's just never a good idea to leave your device laying around. And so make sure that you are practicing healthy and safe, I should say, practices when you are on Wi-Fi. All right, so this has been a short overview of networking hardware, one of the last components of the computer that we're going to cover, and hopefully it was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.